Hi, everyone. This is Craig Zalzer here for the latest episode of the Social Change Career Podcast. I'm here with Paul Breloff, who's the founder and CEO or co-founder and CEO of Shortlist, which is an amazing talent platform and headhunter firm that helps recruit social impact talent around the world, particularly in Africa and Asia and a little bit in other countries. Just a reminder for people who may not have participated in this before, our Social Change Career podcast is live streamed. So we do it on YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. If you're watching on LinkedIn, please in the comment section, let us know where you're watching from and feel free. We're going to make this a conversation. So after about 10 or 15 minutes, feel free to start sharing questions or comments. But particularly, love to hear which country you're from and a little bit, a sentence or two about your background. This is season 9, I think episode 13. So I think we have um, so this is season 9, episode 13, and this is supported by the Rotary Peace Fellowship, which is one of the world's most amazing fellowships for impact professionals, and they offer over 100 fully funded fellowships a year for both professionals seeking a certificate and one of their partner universities in Thailand or Uganda, a 3-month professional certificate, or a fully funded master's program at one of 6 partner universities. So applications open, I think February 1st, but please check it out and I'll put the link here. Paul let me know that error on my part that Shortlist is misspelled, so I will correct that in the footer at the bottom, so I apologize for that. I should have done one more check. And I will briefly read Paul's bio or summarize it. It would take, he has a lot of experience. And again, this session is called Confessions from an Impact Headhunter, kind of what talent solutions for the 21st century. And Paul is the co-founder and CEO of Shortlist, as I said. Since its founding in 2016, Shortlist has worked with over 1,000 companies and almost 2 million job seekers across 30 countries. Before helping to found Shortlist, he was the founder and managing director of Axion Venture Lab, a VC fund investing in inclusive fintech startups globally, and head of business development for SKS Microfinance in Hyderabad, India. He's also been a corporate lawyer, an advertising account executive. I don't think I remember the account executive. We'll have to talk about that. And advises and supports a number of startups and funds in Africa focused on social impact and all sorts of things changing the world. So again, I'm just going to check on LinkedIn, but please let us, yep, it's coming in here. So I'll show people, we have people watching from around the world. So welcome Somalacia from Berlin. Welcome Joseph from Ghana, mechanical engineer. Welcome from France. Welcome from Emmanuel from Kenya. So great to see so many people. So as we're going throughout the chat, please let us know where you're watching from, share some sentences. And again, after about 10 or 15 minutes, we will open this up completely for questions, so you can post them in the comment board. Paul literally just got off a flight probably a few hours ago from India to Kenya, so I'm super appreciative that he has taken time as, let's say, maybe not so much jet lag, but sleep deprived. And yeah. So Paul, thank you so much for joining us. And just to start off with, can you talk about, what type of change have you been seeking to advance in your career? Or how would you summarize, is there one focus to kind of what you've been doing, or what are the area of foci that you've been concentrated on?
As you laid out at the beginning, I've done a lot of different jobs across a lot of different markets. And I think the unifying theme for me has been trying to make business a force for good rather than evil. Obviously, we all know all the stories of the ways business is mucking up the earth and our worlds, but I also think it's too important to ignore. And so initially, for me, it was in microfinance, then financial inclusion, and now more broadly, my objective has been, how can we help companies that are trying to do something good in the world succeed? For a while, it was more of an operating role for me. Then I was playing more of an investor role, allocating financial capital. And Shortlist kind of emerged because we're investing in companies, my co-founder and I, and kept seeing that after we gave them money, their problem was always people related, and hiring was at the top of the list of challenges. And for all the impact investors that were out there, there weren't as many people thinking about allocating human capital in creative and high quality ways. And so there are people doing that work, and we've certainly built an amazing network of colleagues and peers doing that. But Shortlist was our attempt to try to figure out how we could add add to that puzzle piece of enabling these high impact, usually for-profit businesses to access the talent they need to grow and succeed. Sorry, Craig, you've gone.
Yes, not in my mic. So welcome Karina from Buenos Aires. Welcome Roxanne from New York. Welcome Farhid from Islamabad.
Everyone from around the world. It's great.
Yes, welcome Laura from California. So please let us know where you're coming from. So one question, we were chatting before this is, you've been working at the intersection, as we said, of investing, supporting, advising, and particularly around talent. So first of all, there is so much emphasis on impact talent and impact careers. So when someone comes to you, let's say, who doesn't know so much about impact careers, how do you define what the boundaries of that are, or what does it mean to have an impact career?
I think there's a lot of ways you can think about that academically, but normally for me, the most important thing is whether the person's working on something that has a personal meaning and something that they're excited about the potential improvement this could make to particular people's lives or the planet as a whole. So what we focus on a lot tends to be not necessarily companies that consider themselves impact, although we do a lot of work with NGOs, we do a lot of work with philanthropies, but we also do probably the biggest chunk of our work with just startups. And in general, because our focus is across Africa and to some extent India, we think that most companies that are innovating in how products and services reach these markets, particularly mass consumer bases and low-income customers, small businesses, we think by their very nature, those tend to be very impactful. But I think when I'm talking to individuals about these career choices, it often comes back to what's personally meaningful, what's the dent in the universe that you particularly want to make.
And welcome Hillary from Kenya. We've got quite a few people from East Africa. Let's see if we have anyone.
Great to see all the Africa folks.
Let's see if we have anyone from West, North, or Southern Africa. So one question, we'll talk a little bit about your career journey. So when you think back to, either high school or university, did you have aspirations you wanted to do X, or you wanted to be a lawyer, or you wanted to affect change? And how did you go about upskilling and pivoting, particularly because you're, let's say you have 20 years experience, and a lot of people have significant experience in one sector. And, how in the world did you go from account manager, like law, to investing, to doing your own? It's what is your upskilling process, and how do you suggest to others, they think about upskilling?
Yeah, I don't know that I would necessarily recommend doing what I've done. I do think that I think building a broad base of skills and exposure earlier in your career is great, and I'm really appreciative. You could make the argument I've bounced around a little bit too much in certain ways, but for me, there's always been this thread of trying. I love business problems. And I really want to do something I can be proud of when I look back on my life, something that I view as impactful. And so there's always been this thread of what are the skill sets I can develop, and what are the places I can play that ideally are as close to the cutting edge of that impact and business story that I want to be a part of. For me, I've found that the quickest way to learn things is just to throw myself into places I'm uncomfortable and unfamiliar. And I almost, to a fault, have found that the second a learning trajectory or growth curve starts to level off, I tend to jump to a new sector or a new market or a new function altogether, whether that's law or investing or operations or whatever that is. For me, it's worked out really well because I'm someone who learns by doing. Because in the process of learning by doing, you're also finding mentors, finding people who've been there, done that, you can learn from, reading blogs online. And I find that as opposed to let's say a course, is often the better way to do it. And even when I talk to people looking to either shift careers within impact or break into impact, there are some good introductory courses you can do, but I often say, just go find a company you believe in that you can start to get your hands dirty with and start learning and see where it takes you. And as long as you're picking a company that has people you believe in and an impact story you believe in, oftentimes that will start to lead you on an interesting growth journey.
Okay, wonderful. So just going to welcome a few more people. Mario, who's based in Canada. has a startup which helps recruit impact talent called Thrive. So welcome, Mario. Feel free to suggest questions. Yogesh from India, we've seen you before. Karina, I think we've met. No, Karam from South Korea, but living in Portugal. So great to see people. Good luck to Portugal in the World Cup, even though, and then Karina from Argentina working on sexual education for teachers and educators. So I'll ask about 3 more questions, but please feel, and I have many more, but please feel free to start putting your questions forward in the chat box. And for those joining us, let us know where you're watching from. So 2 questions here. One is just, the social impact field. Some people would say one way to define it is connected to a business or a social enterprise or a foundation that's working on directly or, let's say, parallel to issues connected to the Sustainable Development Goals. Other people would say it's a business that puts purpose, at least at some level, equal to profit. So one question is, what are the areas around social impact careers where you see strong growth in the roles or the sectors? And are there some sectors or areas where maybe the job opportunities or the growth is decreasing and maybe not as many opportunities? Obviously, it's country and geographic, sector specific.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it varies a lot country to country. In Africa right now, fintech is still incredibly hot, and when I say fintech, I'm including, of course, financial inclusion as typically the impact-oriented phrasing for that. I can't tell if that's starting to slow down, particularly with some of the macroeconomic things that are happening. Climate and clean energy businesses in the markets we work in are growing really quickly, and I think that climate generally is, the changes we need to make to get to a more carbon neutral future could impact 50% or more of global GDP, not to mention just all the growth in the energy access sector in particular as a subset of the climate world, driven by all of the people that are off grid and clean energy distributed clean energy increasingly becoming one of the best options for that. So lots of job opportunities there. I do think there's an issue right now among professionals around the world that are waking up and having a climate moment, realizing they would like to spend more of their career focused on climate issues and not knowing where to turn. That's something we're working on at Shortlist. How do we become a hub that can, of course, be serving companies and working with companies looking for that talent, but also be a port of call for talent looking to transition into the space. And then the area I'm particularly passionate about is around kind of the nexus of job tech and ed tech, thinking about creative, new, sustainable business models that can think about not just how to educate people, because I don't think education on its own is really getting the job done in terms of getting people working and working in great jobs, but thinking more creatively about how platforms, how technology, how democratized education, how different internship, apprenticeship programs can unlock more fulfilling careers and higher wage jobs for folks who need it. I mean, particularly in Africa, where the average age is 17 or 18, and there will be more people entering the workforce in Africa than the rest of the world combined in the next several years. So that's both a big potential looming crisis, but I hope it's a looming opportunity to get more people working on important things around the world.
Wonderful. So welcome Habiba from Morocco, and another person from Kenya. Welcome, Mary. So I'll ask one more question, and please start sharing your questions. We'll integrate them. So one question isn't just a very practical question. So I've never been able to find who coined this expression, but that talent is universally distributed, opportunity isn't. So can you talk about both Shortlist, but a broader, let's say, perspective? How do you see the shift to a lot of digital opportunities? Is that actually increasing equitable hiring? Because I have a bunch of friends who live in Colombia or other countries who are working for, getting paid very well. They work for regional or global north organizations. Or is that just like a small elite and it's mostly the digital underclass that is, doing a lot of the AI and code, like not coding, but tagging.
Data labeling,
yeah. And so one is that kind of bigger ethical question, and two, for those, whether they're based in Kenya or India or Colombia or the US, if they're looking for remote social impact opportunities, like how do you advise people to start exploring and finding those?
Yeah, there's no question that COVID has accelerated this trend towards remote work, and now you're seeing more companies than ever looking to hire people anywhere in the world that they can find great talent. And I think that is opening up opportunity extensively. And so, yes, that phrase, talent's evenly distributed, opportunities not, it's still the case. There's great inequity around the world in how people access those opportunities, but it's becoming just a little bit more equitable and accessible to people around the world. We're seeing that trend at all levels of organizations. We've been doing more and more work with organizations placing senior traditional hires, CFOs, COOs, et cetera, who can be hired anywhere in the world. We're seeing that. Of course, I think a lot of press has been around more mid to high skilled digital jobs. Seasoned software engineers, sitting at home in Colombia or India or wherever and working for companies around the world. Seeing that with UI, UX designers, data scientists, et cetera. But we are also seeing more emerging pathways into entry-level careers. And, there's a big debate around the kind of digital blue-collar jobs like data labeling, content moderation. And I think it's hard to kind of paint those with one brushstroke. I think there's some of those are pretty brutal jobs, and they're not paid well, and treatment's bad. But we're working with a number of partners here in Kenya that are, I think, providing really good kind of on-ramps to true full-time jobs and career track opportunities in the global digital economy, that hopefully they're not in those jobs labeling, stoplights and whatever for autonomous vehicles for 10 years. But we're seeing ways in which getting a jump there can start to lay an experiential base, learn some basic professional skills, have something to put on a resume, and be a springboard into other kinds of work that might be done. So yeah, we're doing a lot of work, particularly a program called the Rise of Cloud Work in Kenya, funded by the Dutch government, where we've been working with a bunch of organizations on this particular data labeling, how to make those jobs better. We're running laptop financing programs because oftentimes with remote work, having access to a laptop is a precondition to getting these jobs, but it's often hard to find loans for a laptop if you don't have a job. So we've been doing programs there. And we've also been doing things that are more in the traditional software engineering space as well. So a lot happening for sure.
Okay. So lots of questions coming in, and welcome Christopher from the UK and a few more countries. Just one follow-up question. Can you talk a little bit about the metrics? So whether it's in Kenya or Uganda or West Africa, or does anyone have data about the number of people who are working? The percentage of the workforce that is doing remote employment, both for Kenyan companies and globally, and then or what the potential is, and then can you describe a little bit? Particularly, let's say for people doing more the tagging, not the high-end, sophisticated coding or UX design. Like, what is an average salary, or is it more like just piecemeal?
Yeah. So there's not a lot of good data that we've seen, and in fact, we are about to partner with an organization to try to lay some of the data foundation for both get a sense for where things are today. But also project where might we go tomorrow. And so we're actually going to go have a look at what jobs in the global digital economy are the most remotable, meaning they depend the least on physical location. There's a comfort level from companies to work with people, perhaps in different markets, different time zones, different cultures, and then try to take a look at also factors like income opportunities, ease of learning the new skill, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to start to quantify it. There has been data done. The World Economic Forum has put out some research. McKinsey's put out some research, but it's still an area where we know there's a big macro opportunity. We're still feeling out how big it can be. In terms of actually like data labeling jobs, there's a big variety. There are a lot of players that are offering very piecemeal work, paying by like almost the image tagged or micro tasks. Amazon's Mechanical Turk works a lot more like that. And I don't know enough on that to know the details, but I think pay can be more challenging. I think it's those can be pretty tough jobs. A lot of the people we work with, though, are offering more steady employment, So full-time positions, typically starting in the range of $250 to $300 USD, which is a pretty decent entry-level salary in these markets. I know if you're listening to this in Manhattan right now, that probably sounds like nothing. But for a college graduate from a kind of mid-tier university, that can be a pretty good start. And then, of course, what's more important than the immediate salary is just the opportunity to start developing professional skills, have something on a CV, see where you can take that.
Yeah. So I'll start. We got lots of questions coming in, so I'll just make one comment and then get to the questions. So we live in Medellin, Colombia, and we also do angel investing apart from BCDN, and social impact startups. And there's a lot going around in upskilling and the future work that's amazing. And Medellin is trying to position themselves as, let's say, one of the digital hubs of the global South. And we have a center for the fourth industrial revolution here. And there's a lot of interesting efforts to develop local coding talent and AI talent, both for the Colombian market, but particularly for the North American market, and also for other countries. So we have friends who are all, let's say self-taught, but built up their skills and now work for Chilean companies, making an amazing salary. But so it's growing here. And there's also some great organizations like Makaya that are trying to do it from a social justice perspective to work with, like, let's say, girls or women or displaced populations. So to try to figure out like that, the people who have access to this digital world are not just people who have some financial background. So anyway, so start bringing in the questions, and please, as you're watching, let us know where you're watching from. So I don't have this user name, but he or she's looking for a new job in a new type of market. Do you have any suggestions? Let's say mid-career professional, let's say 8 to 15 years experience, and somebody, this person might have great experience in whatever sector, but it's not directly connected to social impact. So how do you advise people who've already got a strong career but want to move to something that is not just building more widgets?
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of people are already in the impact field, but 10 years ago, it was much more common for impact organizations to expect or demand that you had prior demonstrated experience in the impact world, or an NGO or nonprofit or something like that. I think we're now in a world where a lot of organizations are really eager to bring in people from outside traditional the impact space who have more transferable technical skills that can apply. And so I think it's a great time to be looking at these opportunities. There's a lot of ways you could navigate in and sort things. Personally, I think things should start from a place of interest. I would say passion, except I think it's really hard to know what problems in the world you might be passionate about. I think passion is often developed, not discovered, or just like, or maybe discovered and developed rather than like it on day one. I would have never guessed that I was passionate about financial inclusion and microfinance and banking when I started into that field, but it was kind of the easiest place for me to navigate in the social enterprise world, and then got more and more interested the deeper I went. But I do think picking a field to me is probably the most logical spot. Also, if you are geographically constrained and you're not going to be working remotely, starting there, picking markets, picking a problem you want to focus on, then it becomes relatively straightforward to do the research, do the Google search, go on LinkedIn, check out there's all sorts of different blogs and sites. You can see who's doing cool work. I do think that one of the failures we often see is people over relying on job boards and job links. As a headhunter, our business does a lot of this. I can tell you, roughly 75-80% of jobs are never really posted publicly. And so if you're just waiting till you see something online and clicking apply, you're just getting the tip of the iceberg. And so really trying to put yourself in a position where you're networking and building relationships and learning so that you can access that hidden job market, I think is really important. And what that means perhaps in looking at an impact space is going direct to the companies you find interesting and sending enticing ideally with a warm intro, but even without a warm intro, what have you done? Make the meaning and make the connection for that organization. Help explain how and why you think what you've done to date works and will help this organization. I get at least 5 a day people pinging me on LinkedIn that's just like, I don't know, some version of hi Paul or dear sir or something. Please advise if there's any suitable openings. What am I going to do with that? Absolutely nothing. Whereas when people actually write thoughtful emails, whether it's about work at Shortlist or it's about work in the sector and helping figure out, the impact field is full of professionals that want to help people get into this world. And so I think you'll get much better responses that way. Anyways, we talk much more. I'll at risk of going long.
Not at all. It's great insights, and we'll come back in a little bit to actually demystifying what is a headhunter and talent recruitment. But there's lots more questions, so I want to get to these. So Mario from Thrive in Canada said members in 20 countries, and a lot of people want to move to North America and Europe. So let's say that's not specific to North America or Europe, but if someone's located in a country, whether it's Colombia or the UK, and they want to land work outside of their country, and it's not, one is just remote friendly, and now there's about 40 countries that have digital nomad visas. Some are still, Colombia just adopted one, so check it out. One of my friends is behind that. But so there's 40 countries. If you have stable employment or income, you can actually get legal permission as long as you're not making income in those countries. So that's a whole ecosystem. But if someone wants to move, like, what is your advice? Because a lot of people, we do a lot of career support too, and a lot of our people are senior people who've done 15 to 20 years in their country, and they're looking to either move regionally or to another, like at the global level. So how do you advise people like that?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in kind of cross-border job searches at all, but just a couple of thoughts. So first off, we are now at a point where there's so much more remote work. I would very possibly start there. If you're sitting in Ghana and you really want to work in New York for whatever reason, it may be really challenging to go get a visa day one or go find a company to sponsor your physical move to New York day one. Whereas you may find much more luck finding and filtering for remote opportunities, developing relationships and building up a track record and trust with a company there through a remote engagement, and then seeing how you can parlay that into a geographic move if a geographic move is really what you want or need. I do think that this whole, geographic mobility is such a fraught and unfair world. I think if you're coming from certain markets, like a lot of African markets trying to move to US, you're really trapped, and immigration policy makes that really hard. And so hence strategies like starting with remote, I think, can make a lot of sense to build a relationship where a company might actually want to be able to take the chance to sponsor a visa or something like that. On the flip side, if you are in the US or London or something, and you're fortunate enough to probably be able to travel more freely, which is not fair, but it is the reality of the world, I tell people, get to the market you want to get to, and don't try to do it all remotely. I remember I was desperate to get an experience in India, and I didn't make an ounce of progress sending dozens and dozens of emails. I don't even think I got a response. Once I just showed up in India and actually started knocking on doors and going for coffees, things were able to happen really fast. And I think part of that is people know you're serious that way. The friction of signing you up is easier. There is no friction because you're already there. Just start working. And maybe there's an easier ability to build a personal relationship. So I do think, depending on the actual circumstances, just getting there and seeing what you can make happen without needing everything to be figured out can work really well.
Thanks, Paul. So I lived in Europe many years on fellowships and studying, and also I had a work visa in London, because I had like a special, whatever they call it, extraordinary talent. I do think, unless you're working for a multilateral or multinational, they'll often sponsor visas if you work for at higher level positions. But I think, like, if I was applying for a job in the UK now, which I'm not, but it would be very hard to get a visa. So I think in some ways, like, starting remote first, and particularly Tim Ferriss has a term called location arbitrage. So if you can make a global north, or let's say middle global north salary based in whatever country, and save and invest, like, in some ways, rather than moving. I lived in the DC area for many years and I had a good job, but it's so expensive. So instead of trying to like get a job in New York paying 60 or 120,000, get a job in Colombia paying 40,000, which is amazing for Colombia. So that's just something I think too many people think too narrowly. So lots more questions coming in. And then this is from Mary. I think we've talked about this some. She's in Kenya. So just, other trends you see around remote work, or to put this into Shortlist, can you describe a little bit about the challenge or the opportunity that Shortlist is providing or solving? And then how many recruitments you might do a year? And then what do you see, junior or mid-level, or 20% remote or 50%, or, do you see any cumulative data about, is it growing?
So Shortlist does two things. On one hand, we work more like a traditional executive search firm, which means that we are very hands-on professional service consultants to companies that are looking to make senior leadership hires, and we navigate the whole process of them. We figure out what they're looking for. We go map the market and find all these people that have done similar things that might be a good fit. We engage with those people. We sell the opportunity. We evaluate them, and we try to get to a hire. On the other side, what we do is we design and run large-scale youth employment programs, particularly within the climate and clean energy field and within remote digital work. And that's where we're working much more with entry level talent into a mix of geographically co-located jobs, particularly within Africa, and remote work, where maybe someone's in Africa or India, but working around the world. So we see it all. Most of our placements are still more traditionally geographically co-located. People are hiring such and such person to be in such and such role. But we are starting to see more and more companies come to us and say, hey, we don't care where this person is. Maybe they'll someday move. Like, let's say we're working with a company in Kenya. They might tell us, look, like we're happy to get someone anywhere in the world. Maybe someday they'll move to Kenya, maybe not. And we'll see. And that's happening more and more, this kind of agnostic approach to talent. We're also seeing companies more systematically target particular markets that will be of value. Something we've seen more frequently, it's been really hard to hire Kenyan software engineers, partly because it's still a pretty nascent job type here, and companies like Microsoft and Google come in and scoop everyone up and pay them a lot of money. And so if you're a startup here, it's hard to get them. So we're seeing lots more of companies come to us and say, hey, we know we can't build a 50-person software engineering team easily here. How about you guys go help us go build our whole team in India, along with what's the office going to look like? Who's the leader going to be? How's it going to work? Or Eastern Europe or Berlin or wherever. So we're seeing more of this kind of systematic approach of companies to identify which markets are getting better known and specialized for particular skills, particularly at a price point that makes sense. So I think that cost arbitrage is very real for companies too. It's terrific if a company can go to a market and pay what is in that market a very, very attractive salary. That's great for the talent in the market, but also perhaps make it easier to build a team in an affordable way for the company. If that other country is generally has prevailing wage levels that are a bit less. So yeah, no, we're seeing a mix of different things in our business.
So just two comments. One, the same thing's happening in Colombia, that, Colombia has a very strong tech ecosystem in fintech. Part of it's the Rappi effect. Rappi is a delivery app. And so it's, a lot of the early employees are investing in growing startups, but it's hard to get coding talent here now because there's so much competition. So there's even New York Times had an article about it recently. And on a side note, I have a friend who has a 500-person software company. So if you ever want to talk, if you ever want to talk Colombian outsourcing, he does a lot for the global north. So one question, and we'll get back to questions from others. Can you just demystify a little bit of the recruitment process when, because you're an intermediary, you're a filter and you're helping craft job statements and find the right talent. So there's two questions there. Like one, actually, let's say talent recruitment, there's talent management, and there's learning and development, there's talent recruitment. So those are actually job fields and careers. So describe a little bit like what that is, like a career, but also like how do people interface with someone like you, whether it's Shortlist or Koya or any Oxford HR, any of the reliable kind of executive recruitment firms, do you reach out and build
Yeah.
connections? Do you wait until they connect with you? And then, just a little bit demystifying
Yeah.
how this all works.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's still a bit of a new world for us as well. When we started Shortlist, we started as a software company, and we built a whole tech stack that was focused on assessing and screening and engaging talent, particularly because job boards were such a mess and whatever. And we kind of fell into executive search and hands-on recruiting. And you hear that story a lot. So for people looking for careers possibly in the impact space, no one ever thinks about recruiting, executive search, talent acquisition. And you'll meet a lot of recruiters over time, and no one decided in college that's what we wanted to do. But so many people who discover this career path love it, and then they're in it for life. Because I do think it is this interesting mix of genuine like business and management science and research and strategy that you have to understand. I mean, every client and context you deal with is its own mini MBA about like, what is this company doing? How do they work? How do they make money? How does their org chart work? How does this all happen? Blended with this interesting sales and human psychology side to understand, how do I evaluate fit? How do I think about company culture? How do I sell this person and help this person consider an opportunity that maybe they weren't even looking for? So I do think it's a fascinating field. And so for folks out there that haven't ever thought about it, if you're someone who gets drawn to business strategy and learning about businesses, but like the people side, it's something to think about. It can be a great career path. Come talk to us at Shortlist. The second question, how do you engage? It is a bit of a black box. So first thing, it's important to know that it rarely makes business sense for a headhunter to spend time meeting random people who are looking for jobs. Just because the way it works, the way the process works at good firms is you get a client who needs something, and then you go out and you build a market map for that particular situation. You're not just, I think there's a misconception sometimes that headhunters are these people that just go out to coffee with people. And then when they sit down in front of a client, they're like, oh, I've got the perfect person for you because I met them for coffee last week. No, it's a much more rigorous analytical process that's getting done. So you can try that, but very often headhunters aren't going to have the time to go meet for coffee or take calls. What the best thing to do is try to figure out how to get in their database, because every reputable search firm will have a database of talent. You want to be sure you're in there. You want to be sure that like some of your skills are in there. You want to be sure that it's written up a little bit what you're looking for, so that when jobs come up and people are building up their market maps, their shortlists, that you can be on it. And of course, if you can find particular headhunters that specialize in your sector or in your job type, if you can build a relationship, that can be magical. Because if you are a particularly strong candidate, then headhunters really do want to know you, because then they're like, okay, cool. This is a placeable person. This person has skills that I know are in demand in the market. Like if I do 10 or 20 or 30 searches this year, almost certainly one of these is going to be a great fit for this person. So I don't want to discourage you from reaching out to headhunters. Just don't get discouraged if you aren't getting people jumping at coffees left, right, and center. But do make sure that you get into their database. I think one of the ways to easily do that is just send a respectful email. Indicate that you understand what they do, how their job works, that they specialize in XYZ, and kind of make something of like, I would be interested to start building a relationship as I think about my next steps. If you had time for a coffee so I could share a bit more, that'd be great, or a phone call. If not, perhaps you can let me know how best I can be added to your database to be considered for future opportunities. Something like that would probably do the trick.
So just two follow-up questions, then we'll get back to the one. We have about 14 more minutes. So one is, does Shortlist have a database? And just like, how do people get in yours? And then the second question is, can junior, like let's say entry level or people with 1 to 5 years experience get in touch with headhunters, or it's really more you got to be like 8 to ideally like 12 plus? Like, is a headhunter going to talk to someone with 1 year experience or 3 years?
There's recruiters for everything, but generally the hands-on business model of executive search starts with much more senior roles, 8, 10 plus years of experience. That said, there's a lot of firms that are doing more high volume or more junior placements where it's still great. Shortlist does have one. I can put a link in for anyone who wants to sign up and go through. I'll put it in the comments.
If you put it here, then I'll share it to LinkedIn. Okay.
Great. I should put on private chat. So, but yeah, we have that, and almost every firm would have that. We also, anyone who's interested, can go to our shortlist.net homepage, and I think actually we're just updating it in the next 3 or 4 days. But all of the donor and government funded programs that promote more junior talent, you can kind of see what programs are running and apply particular to these programs, where oftentimes we're able to provide free training, job placement, and even wage subsidies. So I actually think we're 3 or 4 days away from updating all that information online on our website.
So one more quick question then. So when you're screening, because I get approached by headhunters, and PCM, we have a great job board, and sometimes we'll help talent, but we're not headhunters. But sometimes a client will say, "Do you know anybody?" So if, let's say, you're recruiting for a role with an INGO or a social enterprise, there's just like generally you do like you might ask for applications, you might do your own outreach, you get a candidate base. You might do initial screenings. I mean, just a little bit, like just quickly, like, so you might map the universe, find 30 people you're interested in, whether it's solicited inbound or outbound. You might do screening interviews, and the screening interviews more just to those are generally pretty short. Just like, hey, like, is it a match?
No, those can be quite long for a senior position. So first off, what we're often doing that's adding value for companies and the talent is alerting them to the opportunities and getting them excited about opportunities they might not know about. A lot of the companies we work with are startups that maybe have raised a little bit of money, but otherwise are unknown. And so a lot of what we're doing is reaching out to people and letting them know, hey, this company's up and coming. It's exciting. Here's the impact they're having in the world. Here's the story, like getting them interested in the opportunity. But then when we're evaluating fit and skill and experience fit, those could be multiple hour conversations. Usually they're 45 minutes to an hour, because we need to be able to talk credibly about that person to our clients and why are they a fit, and help genuinely be a partner in figuring that out and make sure that we stand behind putting someone forward.
Okay, great. So question, Karam, I think, who is from South Korea but in Portugal, asked the question, how do you identify which companies, or it could be nonprofits, are good? Because there are a lot of dysfunctional or unhealthy employers. I mean, Kathleen and my wife and I, we work together at PCN, and we're addicted to all the startup shows, We Crashed, and all the ones that are showing
oh my gosh, me too. I'm addicted.
The horrible, the one Theranos one. So just if someone, whether you're applying inbound or outbound, how do you suggest that someone vets for both the health of a company culture and just if it's a potential match?
Yeah, I mean, I often think the best way is to go direct to employees. Definitely do some Google searches. See if you can see things the company or the leadership team has written. See if you can see any videos of them speaking. What do they believe in? What are the values, et cetera. But getting to actual employees, I think can help a lot. And this can also help you get the job as well. So first, I think if when you click on LinkedIn and you've got the company you're targeting and you're interested in, if you know anyone that works there, you'll be surprised. That might actually happen more than you think. Reaching out to them makes sense. Or second degree connections to anyone that you could just reach out to a friend and say, hey, I see you know so-and-so that works at XYZ company. I'd really love to learn more about, I'm fascinated by their business. I think it could be a good fit for my skills. I'd really like to learn more. Could you make an introduction? And that's great. You can also just reach out to people on LinkedIn. That happens all the time. And keep in mind, the average employee is not getting contacted like that very often. So they're much more likely to respond than if you go straight to the CEO, who's probably getting bombarded by messages every day. But going to an employee and saying, hey, your company looks incredible. I would like to learn a little bit more about it. I see you've been there a couple of years. Your experience looks so cool. Would you have a 20-minute phone call with me sometime to share more? I think that I wouldn't necessarily trust sampling just one person, but if you have 2 or 3 people and they tell a consistent story, either everybody has been very effectively brainwashed, in which case, wow, good for the leader, or it's probably legit. And again, even if it's a bad story, well, then good. You've gotten underneath the hood and you've seen that actually whatever the gloss on the website looks like isn't necessarily bearing up in reality.
Great. So just one extra comment on that. Again, I think one of the trends in the hiring space is also kind of community job boards. So not these open job boards that are getting like thousands of applications, but more, sometimes they're closed, sometimes they're not. Like PCN, we do some of that work, and also communities where you can ask those questions. So LinkedIn groups can be okay, or particularly alumni groups, professors, peers. So, you got to be creative. And I will just say, so many organizations are amazing, but there's so much dysfunction in the impact space in terms of overworking or abuse or harassment or no benefits. So always, like, it's harder when you're entry level. When you get to mid or senior level, it's easier to vet because sometimes they need you more than you need them. So like, so just like, if it sounds good, just investigate it because it can be bad. So let me just see, next question. I got that one. So I think Mario said also look at, B Corps, certain types of, I'm an advisory board of a B Corp, like certain corporations or businesses tend to adhere to more, let's say, better standards. So just checking questions. I mean, a lot of questions on remote work and just, this is more a comment. I don't think. So Mosadi, let us know where you're watching from. Thanks, Paul. Her company runs a climate-related tech job accelerators with a focus in the green energy space.
Oh, wow. Yeah, please reach out, Mosadi.
Mosadi, feel free to let us know what place you're in. So I still think job boards can be very valuable. So I'm curious.
Absolutely.
Actually, Rachel, we still have a few minutes. So if you want to submit questions, just put them in the chat so we can try to get to them. So two questions, and one is just an ethical question, which comes up a lot. I'm teaching a course right now on investing for social impact professionals on Maven. Great platform, making a plug for it. My course is already in progress, but check out Maven. It's amazing. It's a great startup. So one is there's so much greenwashing and purpose washing and pink washing and every washing imaginable. And Catalina and I have big debates about this, that the idea that business can change the world, I think it can, but so much of business is still focused on profit and exploitation of both workers, communities, and the planet. So how do you basically keep a level of optimism when the global challenges are so large? And how do you feel like, is business, like, I mean, I just, was just looking, like 35 trillion is under management. Like out of the 90 trillion plus in public markets in the world, 35 trillion is classified as ESG. And I do a lot of research on this and teach, and 98% of it is crap. It's fake ESG. So I'm just curious, like, so how do you stay, like, are you a realist optimist, or how do you just, in your own career, considering the global challenges, how do you deal with this?
I have long bouts of depression and pessimism about the state of the world. There's a lot to be scared of and sad about. My personal strategy is to pick off smaller problems that I can actually work on and solve that are making a difference, even if it's at a micro scale. I have no illusion the work I'm doing is candidly, or even the companies we work with can on their own fix the world, but I do draw excitement and pride and comfort from the way in which the company, the work that we do and the companies that we work with, you're able to point to direct impacts, direct families or businesses or whatever that are in a better place because of the work you're doing. So yeah, it's challenging. I think the other thing for me is personally, I've really enjoyed sticking to the innovation side of things, where you're really working with whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit, doesn't really matter much. But where I get the most energy is working with companies who are looking at creative ways to do things differently, and are doing it in a way that values people, that treats their teams well. I have, to your point, Craig, I have learned so much and seen behind the scenes now we've worked with, I think about 1,000 companies at this point. And when you're working on hiring, you really do see behind the scenes of the variety of leadership styles and cultures and value structures. And so we've become more and more intentional about working with those companies who we not only believe in on an impact and product and program side, but also very much the teams, the cultures we believe in and we can endorse. Because if we, at the end of the day, we are also selling the product of companies and the product of opportunities to talent. And if we don't believe in it, if the culture's bad, if the leaders suck, it's really hard to try to convince people to go take those jobs. So short answer is we kind of confine the world we operate in to the part that we can most unabashedly believe in, even while we see all the craziness happening around the world.
So one quick comment, then one more question from Karam, then we'll wrap up. So I used to ski race in high school. I loved ski racing. I was decent. It wasn't great. And I wanted to be a ski bum for my life. And I worked at a ski resort for a little bit. I loved it because I got to ski for free and demo everything. But the ski shop was very expensive. So it was a whole thing. I actually told people don't buy things. It was a good company, but I'm like people would come in and say, should I buy it here? And sometimes I'd be like, no, go somewhere else. You can get it cheaper. There's all these things that I'm not sure if that relates. But last question from some global partnership roles from private sectors. Basically, if you go from private to public, from private to the social impact sector, you can have a huge salary cut sometimes, not always. Sometimes they pay better. So is it worth it to take a job that pays less, that is, let's say, more impact focused?
I think it depends what's important to each person. I know for me, it's been very, very clear, and I figured this out really early, that money was not the most important thing in my career. What was much more important was doing work I was intellectually excited about, being surrounded by people I believed in, that I felt a sense of belonging and connection, that I got to feel like we were at the cutting edge of something cool. That feeling of building something new and innovative and cool was more important to me than money. When I shifted, I was a corporate lawyer, making a lot of money at age 30 to India, and I took a 90 plus, probably about a 90% pay cut to do that work, and I have never looked back at that as a bad decision. I've always been, that unlocked such an interesting trajectory for me. So I think what Craig said is right, though. Craig, I think you're spot on. There are places where you can have your cake and eat it too. I'm surprised by the wide variety. There are companies doing great, impactful work that also pay terrifically well. But there is a lot of times where if you're shifting from a real mainstream, fancy corporate background, you probably do need to take a pay cut, and that's just a little bit of soul searching. And if money, I have no judgment for people who are no, the money is the most important thing. I think that's fine. Once you know that, if you know that that's critical, you set that as a constraint, and you go see if you could find something works. For me, it was if I could keep my lights on and eat and go out with friends once in a while, that was always good enough. Although I will say that as careers moved on, that's become, I feel totally happy with how that's worked out over time, even though the initial jump was a big drop off.
Yes. I quit Georgetown. I still teach, but huge salary drop, but I just couldn't, it was worth it for me, but I calculated the risk, and it's turned out okay, but I don't ever advise doing it without calculating the risk. So we have 30 seconds left. So thank you so much for your time and wisdom. And please, everyone, check out Shortlist, check out Rotary, the Peace Fellowship, check out PCDN. And last two quick questions in 30 seconds. What are you working on learning these days? Or you just, it could be professional learning, or you're watching a Netflix or Apple TV show. And then how could people help Shortlist or you? What type of help are you looking for?
I think what I'm increasingly fascinated by is the complexity and the science of culture. and how culture feeds into the future of work, and how organizations are like biological, living, breathing things that we can cultivate and develop, so that the whole can be greater than the sum of its parts. And so I think the social psychology side, the business side, all of that, and how we can apply it in Shortlist, how we can apply it in our clients, I think is really important. What was the second part of that question?
And how can people help you or Shortlist? Like, what type of help are you looking for?
Send great talent our way. Get in touch with me on LinkedIn if you've got ideas for partnerships. I think the personal area I'm most interested in right now is this nexus of job tech and ed tech. So if you're working on a startup, or you're involved in a company that's doing innovative things that helping people getting prepared for jobs, working in jobs, would love to hear about it. Really, I love these chats. Such a great community you're building, Craig, and so really grateful for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much. And our next podcast should be December 12th with Ansuman Bapan, the co-founder of TerraDo, which is a great place for climate careers.
Yes, I know him well. I love the work that he's doing.
Yeah.
Love the work he's doing.
Thank you, everyone, for wherever you're watching. Stay tuned. Check out the 100+ episodes. And Paul, have a wonderful afternoon. And thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.